Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by CaliberMind. This is your podcast for B2B marketers to up-level their skills in leadership. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm joined by Ian Michels. Ian, day 3, you made it. We're going to be talking about taking those data reviews and coming up with a strategy that is supported by that data. So super excited. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, as we were talking about it, I think it's data and visualization of the data help the story and help accelerate that within a business. I don't think you can really separate the two. I know some people are really good. They can look at a chart, they see the numbers, it all makes sense, and they can move forward. But the rest of the company doesn't really think that way. I mean, when you go to company meetings, they use a PowerPoint with really lots of pretty pictures to tell a story, right? And it's the same that goes with data. And as a marketer, if you're trying to tell a story, we have great tools nowadays like Tableau, Power BI that have great visuals to tell the story. But that story has to align with the company's goals, the company's desires, where the company's really headed. If it's just marketing, it's kind of like we talked about on day 1. If marketing is just showing all that marketing is done, I don't care how good your visualization is or how great you're sharing a story. It just doesn't land. It needs to go with what is the company's story. Where are they trying to go?
Yeah, I think 2 things I learned really early on as an analyst. 1, if you put a chart up, you kind of have to have words to go with it. You can't just expect it to land because not everybody sees what you see.
That's right.
I had to have my boss sit me down and be like, Camela, not everyone is staring at numbers all day. You kind of have to talk. And I'm like, man, I don't want to talk. And now I talk all the time. It's fine. I get paid for it. It's great.
Yeah.
The other piece was don't show them everything. So I think we talked about this before. Not everybody cares about the same things. It's not that they don't care about you. It's just they have different priorities. So giving them a bunch of information at once. If you're working, I worked with this CEO with a background as an accountant, and he would get obsessed with any fluctuations or any kind of changes that he didn't understand, even if they were completely irrelevant. So narrowing your slide to focus on the one thing you want them to take away, it will not come off as hiding anything if these are the same things you report on over and over. And I think that's kind of my final point is if you report on initiatives and you're changing what you report on all the time, it reads as trying to hide something, even though that's not your intent. And the reason why the rest of the business, sales, CS, they all have standard KPIs that they're held to and report on a regular cadence. In marketing, I don't think we really have that gold standard yet. So there's a lot of leeway, and that can create friction that we don't intend. Would you like to add on any of that, disagree with it, debate some of it? Happy to do so.
Yeah, I want to quickly make the distinction of, we started with, I opened up with like kind of PowerPoints and things of that sort, but Camela, what you're getting at too I think is really crucial. Executives, sales, the rest of the organization have dashboards they're looking at every day. There are specific standards on the sales side, individual standards of what they're held to accomplish, to execute, get done. And they look at those, whether it's the CRM or a BI tool, those are there. I think you're right in that marketing doesn't really have that, right? I see it sometimes with marketing. They have their MQLs, they have their pipeline, their op creation. I see that sometimes with organizations, but yeah, you're spot on. And I'm guilty of it. I think it's a great call. I mean, I got a little convicted when you said it. So many times, right? I'll sit there and I'm like, oh man, this is a great metric. I need to how do I share this? How do I get this out here? Because this is a brand new finding. And the reality is it's a metric and it's a finding that really just benefits me, doesn't really benefit anyone else, and I don't need to really share it. right? So I think like go back and try to understand like what is this metric actually telling you? Is it just kind of like kind of having your own little parade, or is this like a metric that really is something that needs to be tied into KPIs, that needs to be tied into kind of a greater initiative?
Well, I would say those awesome metrics sometimes just look great on your resume, and you can do that.
Yeah, that's right.
So by changing marketing mix, the next month I generated 1.5 million more in pipeline. That's awesome. Put it on your resume. Maybe don't
Yeah,
shout it from the rooftops in the company unless it's
yeah.
a core focus.
That's right. Exactly. Because it does come across like, well, what happened to this other thing? Is this not going well? Is what's here? Um, and I have run into when I've reported to customers or when we're running through data, those that are a little bit more analytical do quickly point out the discrepancies. And if you
Mhm.
don't have answers for those discrepancies, or if you're not as analytical, like don't go about showing those. Like you know, be careful as you're building those dashboards. Are the data points there things in which you can explain when someone comes to those and looks at that? When your VP of marketing opens up that dashboard, can you explain everything that's there? Right? Try to like really work through each of those. I used to do that with clients where we would open up a dashboard and I'd say, okay, explain all of this to me, and they would have to like go and they would explain this and this and this, but it helped them a ton because then they presented that to their VP of marketing, the head of sales, and they were able to answer most of the questions because they thought about it. It's just like when you're practicing your speech for eighth grade, like you have to like go through these motions, really think outside of just what the points that you're trying to make. What are other people thinking as they look at those things?
Yeah, and there have been points early on in my career where I had to elbow my way in and convince the executive to sit down with me to look at the board deck before they presented it. I think we all go through that as analysts.
Yeah.
But if you do that enough, they start to realize this person's seeing things that I wouldn't notice, and this is valuable. I think that's really important. And that's a good takeaway for marketing leaders. People may notice certain things that you didn't see. Have an analyst on your team. Like if they're not proactive and they're shy or introverted, great. Ask them to tell you what they see because you want to hear it from them because they may see something different.
And I would also encourage marketers, it's not the time to share unique insights is not during the big meeting.
No.
But if you're lower on the totem pole as a marketer and you have an eye for those things, take time during a one-on-one or do a skip level and say, hey, can I share this with you? Can I present something to you? And that will go so far. Like you put together a deck, you built all this, like, and you could have done it all for the big show, but you know, like, hey, I'm not going to do it then. But that says a lot, and it sets you out to be a little bit different. To your point, like then they can say, hey, this person thinks a little bit differently, and maybe we can bring them into different conversations, and it may open up some really cool opportunities.
So when I'm thinking of the big review, I think back to board meetings and felt really fortunate. I understood that they wanted to know the outcome. They wanted to know what went right, but more importantly, they wanted to know what went wrong and what we're going to do differently to avoid it. And that's kind of your storyline.
Yeah.
Acknowledge where you were and where sales was, because if you don't say we missed our bookings, you're going to look really tone deaf.
Hmm. That's right.
And then talk about,
Everyone knows it.
yeah,
So don't just act like it didn't happen. Everyone knows it.
yeah, don't wave your hands and try to distract anyone. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
seen it tried many times. Now, I have come into an organization where, unfortunately, the marketer before me, who's in leadership, would change the dimensions on the axis on the charts and maybe fudge some numbers. So there was a real lack of trust.
Mhm.
I'd love to know how you would go about mending trust in a circumstance where there's obviously already a little bit of tension between the leadership team and marketing.
Yeah, we used to have a saying at a previous company, good news fast, bad news faster. Right?
Heck
So
yeah.
good. Right? And I think that's how you build trust as marketers. get ahead of it. If you're calling out discrepancies and pipeline, it's not it, and again, you have to be cautious with it. It's not to bash sales, because sales could be doing something with their ops that could be inflating pipeline, this and that. But if you're able to do stuff like that and say, hey, you know what, I'm noticing this is messing with our numbers as far as marketing goes. It's great that we're getting this number, but I think this is a little off. Like, calling those out quickly will build trust, right?
Right.
And it because that could be easily something that you could say, all of our qualified leads are leading to all this pipeline, but it's kind of like, this isn't quite work. And bringing that up in a timely manner, in a professional manner, can really help build some trust.
Right. So the way I would coach someone to approach that is to say, our pipeline numbers look great right now. However, when we look at the average dollars per opportunity, it looks like there's a few whales in there that are distorting things. So awesome, but this may deflate over time. So you're not pointing fingers at anybody. You're actually pointing out something that is potentially good if it comes in.
That's right. Yeah, if it comes in. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. But I think that also goes back to our day two. Having an analyst on your team that can just kind of focus on those types of numbers, focus on those things, while marketers can continue to do what they do, is really beneficial. So they can say, hey, yeah, these leads looks like they're great here. They seem to kind of taper off once they actually close. They can dive into that some more. I think, and to your point, like, if you have a boss that's kind of, or you had someone that was a predecessor to you around marketing and all that didn't build that trust. At the end of the day, we're all humans. So figure out what that other human likes, does, like, build that relationship, and figure out, do something a little bit more casual where you talk business. So if that person really loves really good coffee, great. We're going to buy some really good coffee. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk our philosophy on business. Doesn't have to be about marketing, but just, and see where you align. Learn more about how that person approaches their business. What's their business mindset? Because I guarantee you it's going to be different than yours. And I always learn more when I do that with people. I always appreciate when people do that. But then that builds that trust, because then you know where that person's coming from. You can then approach conversations differently. So it's not even marketing at that point. It's just, how does this person approach how they do their current role, and how can I help them do that better? How can I help support them do those things better?
Yeah. And the way I ended up having to approach it, and it worked really well. There were a few things I did. You pick up really quickly on the sore points and what they're suspicious about. So if they're used to the lead number fluctuating over time that you achieved in the past, I had one CEO just obsess over a differential of 5 out of 600 leads that were reported before, and it changed. And we needed to know, if you understand where their trigger points are, you can get in front of that, research it ahead of time, and say, great question. I had that myself. These were conversions that took place from lead to contact, and we ended up merging duplicate records. That's where they went.
Yeah, that's right.
So being super transparent, anticipating the touch points that are going to be a little hairy, and always having an explanation, like review the numbers, review it with an analyst, talk to people about it, see what jumps out at them, and then dig into that so you have the answer ahead of time and don't need to go back to your analyst afterwards and go through these cycles that can last weeks of just discovery.
What I love what you did there too is, there's no blame shifting there. There is a solution, right? There was a problem and a solution. There is no, oh, well, this is because of how we do our lead to contact conversion, this and that. Nope. I'm not going to bog you down with that process. This is what the issue, this is what it was. And if it falls on you being the reason why it happened, because you're the one bringing the news, fine, but you're also the person that created the solution and figured it out, right? Like that's going to go far better for you than, oh, well, it's because our process and we do this and that just doesn't work well with this process. We fixed it though, so it's fine. Like all just bad noise. Like don't do that.
I totally agree. It never works to say someone did this or it's because the sales team is doing that. Focus on what you can control and figure out what you can't address and then how that needs to be positioned in a way that won't blow things up between teams. Which brings me back to your original point that I love. Bad news travels faster than good news. If you see an issue happening on the sales side that you're concerned about, go to them first. Do it before the big review. That is not a place to surprise anyone.
That's right. Yeah, you don't want weird things popping up at that time. Like just get it out there. It's uncomfortable. Live in the uncomfortable. You gradually become a little bit more comfortable with it. It's still uncomfortable, but you feel a little bit better as time goes with it. But yeah, I completely agree.
Ruthless honesty and live with the uncomfortable. And we need t-shirts. That's it.
That's
March.
right. That's right.
Ian, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we do an outro on where people can find you?
Camela, thank you so much for having me. This was just awesome. And yeah, I appreciate you just having me on.
Oh, thank you. Where can folks find you to network and your podcast?
Yeah, so podcast is only on YouTube right now. You can type in attribution time and it'll pop up for you. And then you can find me on LinkedIn if you type in Ian Michels. Last name is Michels.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out caliberbuying.com.